Hey guys, and welcome to Now Showing with
John
and Cam, and this is our very first and hopefully not our last episode.
Yeah, let's hope.
Yeah. You never know. So, guys, thank you for joining us. The plan for this show is to bring you everything pop culture. Mainly, we deal with horror movies and the horror genre, but that's certainly not all. We'll be talking everything horror movies, movies in general, television shows, video games, collectibles like NECA and Funko. As you can see sort of in the background here, been collecting for a long time. My wife and I, we added this movie room onto our house, and we'll be showing you a lot of it throughout the episodes, and John certainly collects as well, so he'll be showing you his collection throughout episodes as well. But the main plan for this channel is just to bring you guys the top news, reviews. When we go out shopping for Funkos and on the hunts for NECAs, conventions, things like that, we want to bring you along the way. For some of you who may not have the opportunity to go to these things or purchase these type of collectibles, we want you to be part of it with us, and we'll certainly be doing giveaways at certain points so that you guys have a chance to get some of these great things as well. And also, one of the main things we're going to do on this channel is countdowns. We want to bring you countdowns from the best of pretty much anything. And with this first episode, we wanted to do a special countdown, so we're going to do each of our top 5 horror movies of all time, and I'm really interested to do this because I certainly don't know what John's top 5 is. He doesn't know what mine is. We've talked about our favorite horror movies, all the time, but we really have never categorized them for each other. But before we get into all that, we want to take the time for all of you guys to sort of get to know who we are and what we're about. And we certainly want you guys in the comments to do the same thing. Let us know a little bit about you. Do you agree with our picks? What are you into? And what would you like to see on this channel? Because we're certainly open to bringing pretty much anything that you guys would be into as well. So I'm going to let John kick it off here. He's going to tell you guys about his life and how he got into all of pop culture.
Oh yeah, like Cam said, my name's John. I'm one part of Now Showing, and I've been into pop culture since for as long as I can remember. I've been into horror movies since I was like 3-4 years old. Unlike him, I didn't get into the gory stuff right away. I was a late bloomer, say 6-7. But I first got into the Universal monsters, so that would be your Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Mummy, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Classic black and
Classics,
white.
Yeah.
Like whenever it took like true acting to kind of make a horror movie, it wasn't solely on special effects, jump scares of what we kind of see today. But then I did get into the more gory stuff, like I said. So I do have a soft spot for Texas Chainsaw, Freddy, all that kind of stuff, 70s horror. And I mean, there's a few after like 70s that I consider to be true horror films, but it's kind of one of those. Is there really still like a horror genre, or like what's going on with it? But we'll save that for later episodes. As far as like video games go, same thing. Like since I was 3-4, a lot of what I'm into, much like a lot of people, is from what my parents were into early on. So one of my favorite types of games are Dungeons and Dragons. When I was 3-4, I can remember sitting on a Commodore 64. Younger viewers, that was a computer. Google it. You might not consider that a computer by today's standards,
Yeah.
But you had to use your imagination to like pretend like, hey, that's a dragon, and like that's shooting a magic missile. But so like I said, Dungeons and Dragons is a huge part, one of my all-time favorite types of games to play, and like that transcribed into one of my all-time favorite games, which is the entire Diablo series. And all my Diablo fans, don't crucify me, but I'm also a big fan of Diablo 3. I know that's a sore subject out there, but I'm also into first-person shooters, other RPGs, racing games, sports games. Well, sports games, NHL. We'll just leave it at NHL. I really don't play much of the others. Never got into that unless we're going back to like Nintendo style, like football and stuff like that. I'm not big into Madden or basketball like this guy kinda is.
Love it.
But yeah, like part of my background and part of the reason like we wanted to do this YouTube channel is not solely just the fact that like we both love horror movies, we both love video games, both love TV shows like Supernatural, Dexter, that sort of thing. I have a background in media arts and animation, video editing, that kind of thing. He has a background in creative writing, which he'll get into more, and we just figured like it was just like the perfect storm of just things. Our love, our passion for all of this, our educational backgrounds. Both of our wives are also into some of the same things we are, so it just made sense for us to, have a dream and just why not go for it, see what happens. Have fun doing it. If it goes somewhere, great. If it doesn't, hey, we tried.
We tried. That's all you can do.
I'm gonna let Cam tell you a little bit about himself, and then we'll get into that countdown and some other interesting things for you.
Yeah, definitely a lot of similarities there with what he was saying. What it says about my parents, I don't know. I started watching horror movies when I was about 3 years old. I have the proof to show it. I got VHS tapes. I'll have to dig one out, and maybe we could somehow put it on an episode one day. It'd be funny. I have a VHS tape when I was 3 of me opening up A Nightmare on Elm Street and a Freddy Krueger doll, and just being ecstatic about it. I believe A Nightmare on Elm Street was the first horror movie that I ever watched, at least based off that video footage. And from then on out, it was horror movies, horror movies, horror movies. Now, I certainly love all categories of movies in general, but horror movies have always been my number one passion. When a new horror movie hits the theaters, I'm usually running out to see it. I, of course, always wanted to do something as a career that involved movies. Whether that be acting in movies, writing in movies, and, hopefully if this YouTube show, if you guys are enjoying it, it takes off, this would be a great passion as well. My other passion at a very young age was video games. I started playing video games at about 5 years old on the original Nintendo. I didn't go as far back as John did with the old Commodore there, but the original Nintendo was my first digital playground that I loved playing on. And my other passion, which happened at 7 years old, my dad took me to see SummerSlam, WWE wrestling back then, the WWE. Which was in Pittsburgh, and I fell in love with it. I still watch wrestling to this day, but when I was 18 years old, I actually take that back, 17 years old, I started training to become a professional wrestler at a local independent promotion was holding a tryout. Wrestling school, and a buddy of mine and myself, we started training. We trained for about a year, and then we started wrestling on small independent shows throughout Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio. Did that for a couple of years, but when it wasn't taking off, when you're traveling 3, 4, 5, 6 hours in a car just to get paid in a hot dog and a Pepsi, and you're taking chair shots to the head and getting beat up, it's not fun. So I went to college for creative writing, once again going back to my original passion, which is movies. I started doing a few writing projects after college, but once again that it was something that wasn't taking off quickly. John and I met while working at the same job that we work at now, and we realized quickly we both had the same passion for the same things. We both collect movies, figures, all of these type of things, and we thought, why not really share this knowledge that we have, this passion that we have, with the thousands of people out there that feel the same way. So we thought this would be a really fun channel to bring to you guys, and we're excited to do so. So I guess we'll get into, before we do our countdown, which is going to be what ends this episode, like I said, our top 5 horror movies, which is...
I just want to cut in 1 second. I forgot something about my past. One of my biggest passions, one of my favorite things in the world. I'm a huge comic book and superhero nerd. So if you have any questions, any things that you want to see on that, please feel free to comment. I would love to give you my my input on the strongest villains, strongest heroes, who would win in a fight, that sort of thing. And then once again, me and my dad collected comic books for the longest time. One of the episodes I'll probably save, and I'll go over like some of the key comics that we have and that sort of thing. But yeah, I just really wanted to get that in there because horror movies, video games, and then comic books, cartoons, movies, everything.
Yeah, and we'll certainly plan on having special guests on episodes and things like that, because when it comes to superheroes and comics, I know a lot of the basics, but I'm certainly not a diehard like John is. So we do have other friends and people we know that are really passionate about certain things. I know John knows someone who's really passionate about comics, superheroes. They're a collector. We may have that person on for that episode, and I'll kind of step aside a little bit so that way, I don't want to sit here and sound like I know what I'm talking about on things that I don't, because I know you guys will call me out on it. And also we may even do some episodes on wrestling if we have any wrestling fans that are in here and in the comments.
I'll step out for that one.
Well, you were a fan at one point in time, so when we talk about a lot of the Attitude Era stuff,
when it was good.
Yes, John could certainly fill in, but definitely, guys, don't be shy to leave in the comments things that you want to see, because even if it's something I may not know a lot about and he does, or vice versa, we would certainly both like to do episodes, concerning that. But so the next thing we're going to do for you guys, since this will be a channel where we talk a lot about news, whether it be horror movies, video games, things like that, we wanted to bring you guys a couple of the latest trending headlines, just a few, just to give you an example of certain things we're going to talk about here on the channel, and then we'll go ahead and get into that countdown for you guys. So let's start it off with one of the more, depressing, big news trends that happened in the last week, and that is the passing of actor Sid Haig, who was 80 years old in his passing. Of course, some of his most famous horror movies came from the Rob Zombie films, House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, but he was also in a lot of, even low-budget horror movies, like he was in A Night of the Living Dead, or a version of The Night of the Living Dead, 3D, it was called, and other. I know, John, you were a big fan of Sid Haig. I actually have, you guys can't see it, but I actually have his autograph up on the wall, behind where the camera is. I have an autograph section, and he's up there. So you want to give a few comments about Sid Haig, maybe the first time you saw him in a film, or what your favorite role of his was?
I mean, I love some of his lower budget stuff, but unfortunately, what I think his shining movie has to be House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, Captain Spaulding. I mean,
can't go wrong.
I don't want to typecast him or say that is what he was, but he just embodied that character, the twistedness of it, and just how he kind of just stole the scenes. Tutti fucking fruity. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. What's the line, if you remember, that he says to the kid in the car, the woman and her child, when he's taking the car? I can't remember, but it's hilarious.
I can't remember. If you know it, please comment. So
yeah, it's hilarious when he scares them when he's taking the vehicle. But meeting Sid Haig at the convention that I met him at a horror convention that was about 45 minutes from where we live here south of Pittsburgh. He was really awesome. He was a nice guy.
Zombie capital of the world.
Yes, it is.
We'll go into that more too.
Absolutely. And even on the autograph he signed to myself, Cameron, and my wife Jenna, he said, "To Cameron, Jenna, don't shit the bed." That's what he wrote on the autograph. He was a really nice guy. Definitely Captain Spaulding. You can't go wrong. It's a shame with the newest Rob Zombie film, 3 from Hell, which John and myself, we haven't saw yet. We did not go out to one of the 2-night showings.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the reviews were really bad from it. It's coming out in a couple of weeks on Blu-ray and DVD, so we'll definitely check it out for you guys and maybe give a review then. But from what I understand, from what I've saw, he had a very, very small role in the movie, and that was simply because his health was declining and he wasn't doing well. So Rob Zombie had commented and said that he was at least very happy that he was able to get him in there for the short amount of time that he was. But it's a shame that we won't be seeing Captain Spaulding anymore. But we definitely wanted to bring up Sid Haig because he was definitely a great iconic character in horror movie history. Second bit of news for you guys. There is a rumor that, it's already been stated that Candyman is being remade by Jordan Peele, as we all know. And the big lingering question has been, who will play Candyman in this remake? I know a lot of people have been on edge, but new rumors have been circulating that sources close to the film are stating that Tony Todd may have signed on to come back as Candyman. I know that's got to be exciting to you, John, because
Yeah.
you were worried about this casting.
I really was.
Yeah. This, Candyman is it's an iconic horror series. I mean, some of the sequels were so, but the original film is still, just a really dark, intense movie. And Tony Todd, of course, as you all know, I'm sure horror fans watching this, you've seen it. He knocks that role out of the park. And if he does come back and portray Candyman, I think that's the best move.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. It's a sore subject for me. I'm not a big fan of all these reboots and remakes and stuff. Like, I like an original idea. Like, give me something I haven't seen before. Don't try to piggyback on something that was amazing. Like, let that be amazing. Let that be what it is. But I'm always whenever the actual actor comes back, one of the worst things that ever happened, if you want to talk about doing a reboot and completely messing it up, the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot, do you remember what happened? You didn't get Robert Englund, and look, I mean,
I don't even acknowledge that.
Yeah, it's not. So I mean, that's kind of whenever all these people are doing reboots and stuff, that's kind of what's in the back of my head.
Yeah.
But to get Tony Todd to come back, I mean, that would just be.
That would be huge.
Yeah, I mean, there's no better, for a horror fan, for, just the horror genre in general, that would just be incredible. Because I told Kim whenever we first found out that they were going to redo Candyman, I was like, I would at least like to have, a cameo, a little, spot where Tony Todd was in it. But to have him, reprise the main role,
I'm on board. Now I want to see, when they announced it, I was kind of I'm sure I'll go see it. But I doubt they'll be able to, like we all say with most reboots, I doubt they'll be able to capture any of that essence from the original. But if he's coming back and reprising the role, they may certainly be able to do that. And the last bit of news for you guys today, for a little bit of video game news, and still sticking on the topic of horror. The Resident Evil franchise, of course, by Capcom, is getting ready to release a new game. The actual release date has not been confirmed, but it is expected to not be too far off. And their newest game is called Project Resistance. And this is not going to be your traditional style Resident Evil game. It's going to be basically a 4v1 game, meaning that you will have 4 co-op players that will be trying to make their way throughout levels, while there is one player, sort of like the game Evolve or these other types of games where there's someone who is on the enemy side that will be controlling all of the bad that happens to these players, whether it be releasing zombies, tyrants, lickers, all of the classic creatures from the Resident Evil video game series, and it'll be up to the bad player to destroy all 4 of the good guys, STARS members, which I take that back. I don't believe they are STARS members. I think it's the way they make it look, it's civilians. And it's up to the players to team work together to solve the puzzles and get through. So it definitely has an interesting, almost Left 4 Dead style.
Yeah.
But the reason why we're talking about this is because for those of you who are interested in Resident Evil, or if this game sounds interesting in general, right now, if you go on YouTube or any other, you can search it out on Google, Capcom has released a full video of an entire level walkthrough, because they are going to be releasing a closed beta that you have to sign up for on Capcom's website. So for those of you who haven't checked it out, go ahead and you can watch a full walkthrough of the game. I myself, I've checked it out. John hasn't gotten a chance to check it out yet. It definitely looks interesting. There's still, you can tell by the video, there's things they need to work out from the gameplay. It doesn't look that crisp at times, but it certainly has potential. And anytime you say the word Resident Evil, my ears are ringing, because I'm ready to check it out. So definitely be worth something trying once it comes out, for sure. But with that being said, I think it's time we do our countdown.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, I mean, this countdown it's a tough one to do. I mean, when you're talking about your top 5 horror movies of all time, and you're talking about 2 people who have been watching horror movies since they were 6 and 3, that's a lot of ground to cover. So I'm sure if we did this same list 5 years from now, we'd be like, wait, well, I changed this and I changed this. Heck, if we did it 5 days from now, I'm sure we change it. So this was really hard to do, but we're definitely curious to see if you guys agree in the comments with us. Tell us what your top 5 horror movies are. You want to start us off, John? I'm very curious for your list. We'll start with number 5, and we'll go to number 1, and we'll give a little bit of a description of the movie and why it made our list.
All right, so my top 5. My number 5 might be a little controversial because it is number 5.
Shazam?
Yes, Shazam. No, it is The Exorcist. Is actually
Damien Counts.
And I'm the devil! Now kindly undo these straps.
And I've often said that if I could ever travel back in time and watch a movie when it first came out,
sure.
This is the one. I would love to see, like, back when this movie released, see the reactions to people's faces. I feel like this is one of my all-time favorite movies because, like, when you look at a genre of, like, horror movies and you break that down into, like, say, possessions and exorcisms and that kind of thing, nothing has come close to touching this movie. Like, when you say, like, those kind of movies, this is the only one.
And it hasn't aged.
Yeah, that's the
like
thing.
That's what's crazy. Like, you put it on, and there's not one moment where you're like, oh, that's outdated. That looks bad. That doesn't hold up anymore. Like, you watch that entire movie, and you could take, like, let's say most people probably aren't watching horror movies at the age we were. So let's just say like a 12-year-old. You could sit a 12-year-old down today, and we all know, nothing against any 12-year-olds today, but they're, what they like or it's probably different than what we liked as a kid because horror movies are a lot different today. But I bet you it would scare the shit out of them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It still would. The atmosphere of it, just the cinematography, everything about that movie was just amazing. The acting, the dialogue, just the story.
Absolutely.
So number 4.
What do you want me to? You want me to go 5?
Yeah,
actually, you want to do it that way?
We'll go back
keep
and
it
forth.
back and forth. Okay.
Yeah.
So my number 5 is a film from 1996 that a lot of people love, but other people were kind of torn on it. So I'm curious to see what everyone else thinks here. But my number 5 is Scream.
You like scary movies? What's your favorite scary movie?
Scream was such a huge movie for me. I remember it was 1996, so I was 8 years old. I had not saw any of the trailers on TV. My mom comes to me one day, because my mom used to take me to the movies. When a new horror movie came out, she took me all the time. And she came to me and said, hey, there's this new movie out. It has Drew Barrymore and Neve Campbell. It's about this killer that calls you. And I'm like, yeah, let's go. So my mom takes me to the theater.
Ma'am, do you know this movie's rated R?
Yeah, and we got that all the time. And I was from the opening, which I would contend is one of the greatest horror movie openings of all time. And I'm sure most of you have saw Scream, but if you haven't, I mean, you need to get out and watch it immediately. But blew me away. I loved it. I loved how smart the movie Scream is. It's a movie that isn't afraid to announce all of the famous horror movie tropes, like you shouldn't have sex, you shouldn't leave the room by yourself, and they do all of these things. They have the characters do these things, but they also have the characters acknowledge that they shouldn't be doing these things. So it makes fun of itself in a way. I've always thought the voice of Ghostface when he calls people is just such a classic voice. The score to that movie is great. Wes Craven, Kevin Williamson, I mean, a huge collaboration there. The sequels, I enjoy the sequels, but the first one really is the one that stands the test of time for me. And Scream is one of those movies I can just go back and watch over and over again.
And we kind of discussed this once before about how Scream kind of brought horror movies back in the 90s.
It did. I mean, horror movies went through this huge boom in the 70s and 80s to where, no matter where you turned, there was a new horror movie coming out. And then something happened from like 1991 through 1995 where a lot of studios weren't wanting to put out horror movies anymore. They thought they were dumb. They weren't going to make the big money at the box office. If you go back and look at those years, a lot of the horror movies that released in the early 90s were straight to VHS. They were low budget. They were considered B horror movies, C horror movies, D horror movies, and so studios weren't getting behind them. So it took a lot for even Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson to get this movie made and for Dimension Films to actually get behind them and do it. But when it came out, it was a blockbuster hit, and next thing you know, the trend just starts shooting up with horror. You started getting your I Know What You Did Last Summer, your Urban Legends, all of those big 90s teen slasher films just started coming out, and luckily it was a new boom before.
Yeah.
Your number 4?
My number 4 is kind of a guilty pleasure for me. Cam might actually disagree and tell me I'm crazy for having this in a top 5. But
just knocked everything.
Yeah.
That's my anger before you announce it.
And that's Trick or Treat.
Ooh.
I just love because it's not super recent, but it's somewhat more recent, and I just felt they did everything right to kind of like give you that 70s horror movie feel. I love the anthology. They did an amazing job of tying all the different stories like in together. And Sam, which is the little burlap sack guy, I think he's one of the greatest characters ever created. As long as he keeps that burlap sack on.
Yeah.
Once he took that off, that kind of ruined it for me. Kind of like in Jeepers Creepers, whenever like he got wings and everything. If he would have just stayed with the hat and like that was it, that would have been perfect for me. But yeah, Trick or Treat, it was just such a good, like, fun movie. Not so much like this amazing story, this amazing like blockbuster hit, like grab you at the edge of your seat. It was just a bloody good time. Like it was just a fun horror movie that like I haven't had one of those in a really long time. Like it's always like a serious horror movie, or it's just way so over the top, Sharknado, that kind of thing. But this one I thought was, if you want like just something you can watch without like having to like take it serious, miss something, this is the movie. But there's so many good things in it that for me it's my number 4.
I knew you liked that movie. We've talked about it before. I didn't know that you held it to that regard. I certainly like the movie Trick or Treat. Definitely wouldn't be in my top favorites, but I can see with everything you're saying there why it could be in someone's top favorites. So my number 4 I won't talk too much about because it was already on John's list, but my number 4 is The Exorcist, 1973. John said pretty much everything that needed to be said, and I agree with him. If I could go back in time and watch a movie live in the theaters with a crowd as they were seeing it, I would see The Exorcist. For those of you who haven't watched a lot of the documentaries are out there, or even just read about it, people were actually having heart attacks in the theater while watching The Exorcist because they were so shocked at what they were seeing. People were fleeing the theaters. They would have ambulances stocked outside the theater for people who fainted and needed medical attention. And like we said, the movie just holds up so well. Linda Blair, it's amazing that they were able to get away with the stuff they were able to get away with.
Yeah.
And I'm sure all of you who have seen the movie, know what we're talking about, that they were able to film these scenes with a child, and just I think what makes this movie so far above and beyond other possession films is how far they're willing to go, that it makes you feel like if a possession happened and you were there witnessing it, that's how it would go. And that's how a demon would speak through the mouth of a child, because a child represents innocence, and when you hear this demon saying these horrific things and doing these horrific things, it's extremely unsettling to watch, and not to mention the amazing makeup effects and the score. I mean, who can't remember the score to that, which hopefully, we may have it playing for you guys right now if you've never heard it before. But, on top of that, The Exorcist is my number 4. It was really hard. I almost wanted to put this one even higher, but it was a tough call. But, that's my number 4.
Alright, so my number 3. So everyone knows Michael Myers. Everyone knows Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger.
Who?
Yeah. One of my all-time favorite movies, and also one of my all-time favorite characters that doesn't get enough love, in my opinion, is the tall man from Phantasm. So my number 3 is the Phantasm movie. That spear, just everything about that movie. It's an original take on the movie, like on a horror genre. Don't get me wrong, I love slasher, Jason, Michael Myers. But once we get to my number 1, you'll see why I kind of lean more towards something a little more realistic. But this is kind of my favorite, more off the wall kind of character. it's been a while since I've seen it, but it's been in the back of my head that like I really want to rewatch this, especially since Halloween's coming around. So I start to kind of go through some of the movies from my childhood and kind of start watching. And this is one of the ones that really popped in my head. I just think it is such an original. It's such a cool concept, and it doesn't get enough love. So yeah, my number 3 is gonna have to be Phantasm and the Tall Man. I mean,
awesome. Yeah, I've always liked the Phantasm movies for sure.
Well, the first two, then some of these sequels, especially the most recent. If you haven't seen it, I recommend not seeing it.
You're lucky. If you haven't
yeah, I would just keep it at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first two, and then after that, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so my number 3. This is a movie that literally, when it comes to an end, when the credits roll and the main menu pops up, I would have no problem hitting play again and just letting it go through. My number 3 is The Lost Boys. In my opinion, the greatest vampire film ever made. I know John probably doesn't agree with me, but greatest vampire movie ever made. And this movie also, the 80s, if I had to pick my favorite, decade of horror movies, it's tough, but I would say the 80s, because the 80s just cranked out so many hits, and even ones that weren't hits just had such cool effects that it was just amazing. This encaptures everything 80s, from the hairstyle, from the clothes they wear, the motorcycles, the music, the carnival scene. I mean, it's amazing. Plus, back in that time, my favorite actors, probably if I had to pick in the 80s, Corey Feldman, Corey Haim. Anything they were in was gold. Kiefer Sutherland in The Lost Boys, you can't go wrong. And if you've never seen it, honestly, if you're new to horror films in general, if you're tuning in to this channel because maybe you're new to horror and you want to kind of see what's out there, and honestly, if you're going to watch a vampire film, I encourage you to start with The Lost Boys. It's an amazing film. Two brothers, they move to a fictional Santa Carla, California, which is the murder capital of the world, and they find out that they are living amongst vampires, and they get involved with them, and they got to try to stop them before they get turned into them, so to speak. And it's an amazing movie, great soundtrack, The Doors, as well as other great bands. My favorite vampire movie of all time, hands down.
This is the one on Cam's list that I don't really agree with. I love the movie, but I couldn't put it in my top 5.
I gotcha.
Alright, so my number 2 is Nightmare on Elm Street. The first one. I mean, the first few. Granted, I like all of them, except for the one that we mentioned earlier.
That don't count.
But the first one, I feel, is the best of them. I feel they kind of went a little too crazy when you got into, like, the Dream Warriors and everything. They were still fun to watch, but once again, it sounds weird that I like the realism of the first one, because it is so far-fetched that someone's killing you from your dreams. But I love that fantasy about it. What worse way is there to like kind of die? Like, how scary is that to like that you fall asleep and this pedophile comes into your like dreams and that's how you die, like
sounds
in your
like
sleep.
My childhood. Wait, what?
Yeah. So I'm not gonna get too much into it. But yeah, my number 2, because one of my all-time favorite of like your main horror villains, Freddy's always been my favorite because he's original. He's not your typical machete, butcher knife, slow walking. Like, there's some like actual like charisma, and like the comedy of him like just adds to like that sinister like of that movie. So
yeah, and it definitely became more comedic as they went because they gave Freddy such a higher personality. The original one, I think, was definitely him in his scariest form.
Yeah,
because he did talk, but you didn't see him nearly as much, and when you did, like, you were really freaked out by this guy. I've always enjoyed Nightmare on Elm Street. I didn't put it in my top 5 horror movies, and even though it is the first one I believe that I watched, but I do love A Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's what's awesome too about him is just the simple fact that like you can't avoid sleeping, right? It's like something you have to do. So that's what's so crazy is if you go to bed, he will kill you, but you can't not go to bed, so or you'll die. So you know what I mean? So that's just such a great concept. So I that was really a hard one for me not to put in the top 5. I wrestled with it. It's probably right out there. If this was a top 6, I'd have Nightmare on Elm Street right there. My number 2.
If this was a top 20. Lost Boys still wouldn't be on.
My number 2 is going to throw John off, I think, because I think he was anticipating this to be my number 1. My number 2 is Halloween. Halloween is a movie that I have loved. Michael Myers is my favorite of the slasher villains. Halloween, to me, is timeless. It's classic. It's a 10 out of 10 score. In my opinion, I hold it above Freddy Krueger, Jason, any of them. I don't think that you can put any of them in Michael Myers' league just simply based off how simple of a premise, yet it's the most effective, I believe, in any of the horror movies that are out there. Because when you watch that movie, even to this day, the first film in particular, it is so creepy to not know who this guy is, why he's doing what he's doing, and the fact that he is just pure evil. He murders his sister for no reason at all, gets put away in a mental hospital for years, breaks out on Halloween, and goes after who we would soon later find out is his sister, which in the new Halloween isn't, but and just does these horrible things for really no reason at all. Obviously future sequels would try to put some story even behind that in a cult sense or whatever, but we won't talk about that horse shit. But the original Halloween, in my opinion, if I have to label the perfect horror film, there's more than one, but the one that's immediately going to pop in my head is Halloween. I really don't think you can point out anything wrong with the original Halloween movie, and in my opinion, the most iconic score ever made. The theme song to Halloween,
Halloween
is
and
unbeatable.
Exorcist are the top 2.
I mean, there is nothing that comes close in score to Halloween in terms of just amazing and just sheer terror. So Halloween is my number 2, and trust me, I really wrestled with it being my number 1.
I'm surprised that's not his number 1, honestly. I really expected that. So just real quick, I want to stress how tough this was. The only thing that was not tough for me was my number 1, but 2 to 5 was really hard to kind of like pinpoint. But my number 1, hands down, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's always been my number 1 horror movie. And that's getting back to...
And he's saying Texas Chainsaw 3D, right?
Yeah, the 3D, The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Once again, the original. The first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Because, like I said, I like a lot of, like, realism in my movies. Like, in my horror movies. Like, if a movie, like, I watch it and I'm like, holy shit, like, this could really happen. I just feel that amplifies, like, the terror and the fear in that movie tenfold. And, like, this movie does that for me, hands down, the best. I mean, you can pretty much, like, imagine going on a road trip in the middle of Texas, and, like, the next thing you know, there's a chainsaw wielding madman, like, with a face that he made from other people that he killed. His entire backwoods, like, inbred family is, like, just as messed up as him.
Sounds like my childhood. Wait, what? I mean,
so I mean, like, that, like, the Texas Chainsaw, like, that is the epitome of horror to me, and that's why it's my number 1. I went by, like, what scared me the most, what I feel is actually defines horror the best to me. Yeah, like, Halloween with, like, Michael Myers, yeah, that's terrifying. Freddy, yeah, that's terrifying. The Exorcist, yeah, that's terrifying. But, like, the realism of knowing, like, hey, that could really happen is why Texas Chainsaw has always been my number 1 movie.
Yeah, and I don't want to scare away a lot of our viewers, which I'm probably about to do right now, but I mean, I agree. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, once again, it was really hard for me not to put it in my top 5, but I'm one of the very, very few that actually prefers the remake to the original. I know.
I like the remake, don't get me wrong, but
I don't know what it is. I felt like I love the original, but I just felt like the remake was a little bit more amped up, and I felt they were able to do some more with it. But at the time that the original was made, I understand it was way, way beyond its time. It's an amazing
grittiness
movie.
of the original was what really...
Yes, the original makes you feel like
the
original feels like you're watching something you shouldn't be watching.
Yeah, it's like a
which
snuff
is
film.
awesome. Yeah, exactly. So I definitely agree. And like I said, it was hard for me not to put that on my countdown for sure. But my number one.
Yeah,
Well, when I say this, you'll know what my number one is. My number one is, some people might not classify it as a horror movie, but I'm going to classify it. My number one is actually my favorite movie of all time, and some people may not classify it in horror, but hey, if you were in the situation of what this movie's about, you would sure as hell say it's a horror movie, so I don't want to hear it. My number one movie is a movie that I watched over and over and over and over again growing up. It's a 10 out of 10, perfect film, in my opinion, like I said, best film of all time. It brings chills watching it. My number one horror movie of all time is Jack Frost. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. My number one horror movie of all time is Jaws. Jaws is, it's perfect. And some of you may say, the shark's outdated today. No, it's not. It still looks phenomenal. If they would remake the movie today, it would end up being a CGI shark, and I would just be pissed off the whole time. If you've ever watched the making...
Refrain from CGI.
Yes. If you've ever watched the making of Jaws and saw just how much shit went wrong during the making of this movie, how many times this movie was almost canceled because the mechanical shark would sink, and how much dedication the actors put into this movie, whether it be the working of the shark or Robert Shaw was extremely seasick, so every time they yelled cut, he'd throw up over the side of the boat. It was just, there was so much that went into making this movie. Spielberg, of course, I don't have to say anything about him. We all know
I think he became big.
He was alright. He had a couple hits. But this movie, from the moment I watched it as a kid, I couldn't get enough of it. Not all of the sequels are great, we know that, but Jaws is a movie that I can just watch.
You didn't like that he tracked them to the Bahamas?
It was great. I have to admit, I love that. No, part 4, you can just forget that one. I don't mind part 3 though in SeaWorld. I know a lot of people hate that, but I don't mind it. But no, part 1, just a perfect movie. Everyone who has saw Jaws is affected by it. You don't go to the ocean and not think about Jaws. You don't go swimming in the ocean and not think about it. And I know I said Michael Myers' Halloween has the perfect score, but the score to Jaws is right there with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That song is one of the most iconic, simple songs you'll ever hear. But I guarantee if you're swimming in the ocean and some guy rolls up with a stereo and hits that song, you're going to be like, oh shit, and you're going to be paddling to the shore. Or if you're not already thinking of the tune, dun 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 dun, in your head. Hell, that movie had such an effect, it scared people out of swimming in their swimming pools. People were afraid they were going to get attacked. In the time that it came out in the 70s, people weren't going to beaches because they didn't want to swim in the ocean, or if they did, they didn't swim.
Yeah, it caused a panic, a nationwide panic.
It did. So, Jaws, for me, it's my favorite movie of all time, throwing that out there. And I think it's the greatest horror movie ever made, simply based on how great that is from scene to scene, and the effect that it had on people. It's considered the first ever summer blockbuster. That term that you hear now every summer, the summer blockbusters, whether it be Avengers films, whatever, that term was coined off of Jaws. And that movie made over $80 million in its first theatrical run, which if you adjust that to inflation, they say is upwards of $800 million today. Yeah. So it's crazy. So Jaws is my number one. I battled between that and Halloween. Jaws is my favorite film, but Halloween was right there in terms of just sheer horror. But yeah, that's my number one.
I would probably put Jaws top 10 for me. That's one that I definitely agree 100%. That is a horror movie. I know you can argue that it's a drama, but I mean,
yeah, it's horror. I mean,
horror.
let's face it. But yeah, so that's our countdown, guys, for our top 5 horror movies of all time. Like I said, it was extremely hard. We could sit here and do honorable mentions all day.
We might do anniversary episode if this actually takes off a year from this
And
one.
see if we have the
we'll
same.
probably do another one and see what's changed.
Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely want you guys to leave your top 5 in the comments. We'd be anxious to see if you agree with our list, what you like. Now, this first video, guys, was a little bit longer than what our normal episodes will be. You know, we wanted to take the time for you guys to get to know us a little bit. The next bundle of episodes, we plan on coming out with a lot for you guys. The next bundle of episodes will primarily be countdowns like we just did. They'll be strictly countdowns. We're also going to be doing a very soon from now, we're going to be doing a beta review of the Call of Duty Modern Warfare beta that just dropped. We're also going to be doing some news episodes for you with quick shout outs to news. We'll have some reviews coming along the way, but for right now, look for very soon following this video a bunch more countdowns for you guys. We'll definitely keep you in touch. Anything you want to add, John, for the first episode today?
No, just if you like it, please subscribe, follow.
Absolutely.
And like I said, please comment and let us know what we can change, because we honestly care about what your opinion is. Like, cause yeah, we're doing this for ourselves, not gonna lie, but honestly, like, we're doing it for you. Like, we want to know what you want, what your opinion is, because we want this to be kind of like one of your one-stop shop, like, when it comes to horror and pop culture. Because I know for me, like, I get on YouTube and I look and I'm like, oh, top 10, let me watch that. Oh, look, there's a review on this. Like, I would just want something where it's all inclusive. I can get a little bit of everything, and that's kind of what we hope to be. Like, we want to be the YouTube channel for the fan to get what they want and not have to search a bunch of different places. So, like I said, please flood the comments. Any way you want to contact us, we'll be getting some of the other social media sites up in good time, and you can contact us on that.
Yeah, we'll definitely, we'll keep you guys followed up on that. Once we get the Twitter page for now showing and everything up and going, we'll definitely, let you guys know. We'll have links for everything once that's all up and flowing. So like John said, please like, subscribe. If you enjoyed the video today, don't be afraid to let us know what you liked, didn't like, what you want to see in future
episodes. If you really
episodes.
like it, don't be afraid to share it, share your friends.
Please do.
Help us get out there.
And anyone else that's watching this that's in the Pittsburgh area, like we said, in future episodes, we plan to go to horror conventions when they come to town, things like that. And we'll be letting you guys know. We'll even be doing in the future some live shots from those places. And we'd be happy, any of you guys that would like to ever meet up if you're from the area as well, and we let you know where we're going to be, and you guys are going to be there as well. Definitely let us know, because we'd be happy to meet other horror enthusiasts like ourselves.
Yeah.
So definitely keep in touch, guys. Like, subscribe. We will be back very shortly with the next episode. I believe our next episode is going to be our top 5 Stephen King book to film adaptations, because Stephen King is having a renaissance right now with Chapter 2. So definitely look out for that. We'll have plenty more countdowns to follow. Like, subscribe, and you've been watching Now Showing.